I've lived in a lot of places in my life. Apartments where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor's alarm clock. Rental houses where the landlord would show up unannounced. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me
for living under an HOA run by someone who treated neighborhood guidelines like they were the 10 Commandments carved in stone. My name is Ion, and this is the story of how an HOA president's power trip backfired in the most spectacular way possible. But to understand how sweet that comeuppance was, you need to understand what life was like in our neighborhood before that night. Picture this: a suburban neighborhood. Nice houses, well-maintained lawns, tree-lined streets. The kind of place that looks perfect in real estate photos. And on paper, it was perfect. But living there, that was a different story entirely. Our HOA wasn't just strict, it was suffocating. We're talking about an organization that would fine you $50 if your trash cans were visible from the street for more than 2 hours on non-collection days. $50 for trash cans in your own driveway. They had rules about everything. Your mailbox had to be a specific shade of black, not dark gray, not charcoal, but their approved black. Welcome mats couldn't exceed 2 feet by 3 feet, and they had to be solid colors only. No patterns, no cute sayings, nothing with personality. One time, my neighbor 2 doors down got cited because her garden gnome was considered visual clutter. It was one gnome, about 8 inches tall, sitting next to her petunias. She had to remove it within 72 hours or face escalating fines. Another neighbor got hit with a violation notice because his car was parked in his own driveway overnight. Apparently, there was some obscure rule about vehicles needing to be garaged between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. unless you had a permit. Nobody actually knew about this rule until he got the fine. The holiday decorations policy was insane. You could put up Christmas lights, but only white lights and only on certain parts of your house. They had to come down by January 5th, not January 6th, or you'd get fined. Halloween decorations only from October 15th to November 1st, and they couldn't be excessively scary. What does that even mean? Who defines excessive scariness? I need you to understand just how dedicated Linda was to her role. This wasn't a hobby for her, it was an identity. She had actually retired early from her job as a middle manager somewhere, and being HOA president had become her entire personality. She would drive around the neighborhood 3 times a day: morning patrol at 8 a.m., afternoon inspection around 2 p.m., and evening rounds at 6 p.m., like clockwork. Some people joked that you could set your watch by Linda's inspection schedule. She kept detailed files on every property. If you got a violation notice, it wasn't just a simple form letter. Oh no. Linda's notices included photos, timestamps, references to specific rule numbers and subsections, and often a passive-aggressive comment about community standards. There was this one legendary incident about 6 months before the party. Old Mr. Peterson, who'd lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, planted tomatoes in his front yard, just a small garden bed, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, with tomato plants and some basil. Linda showed up with her clipboard and her measuring tape. She informed Mr. Peterson that vegetable gardens were only permitted in backyards, not front yards, per Section 7.4.2 of the HOA bylaws. Mr. Peterson tried to argue that tomatoes are technically fruits, not vegetables, so the rule didn't apply. Linda wasn't having it. She escalated the issue to the HOA board, which she controlled, and they voted to fine Mr. Peterson. He ended up having to transplant his tomatoes to his backyard. The whole neighborhood was talking about it for weeks. I'd had my own run-ins with Linda, of course. Everyone had. She'd cited me twice in the first 6 months I lived there. Once because I had my garage door open past 9 p.m. while I was organizing some boxes. Apparently, open garages after dark were unsightly and potentially hazardous. The second time was because I'd put out an extra recycling bin during spring cleaning. The rules stated 1 trash can and 1 recycling bin per household, visible only on collection day. I had 2 recycling bins out because I had a lot of cardboard boxes. $50 fine. After that, I learned to fly under the radar. I followed every rule to the letter. I kept my grass at exactly 2.5 inches. I painted my mailbox the approved shade of black. I made sure my car was always in the garage by 10 p.m. I thought if I just followed the rules, Linda would leave me alone. And that worked. For a while, until my brother came to visit and I made the mistake of trying to have a normal social gathering in my own home. The party planning and setup. My brother Samir had been working overseas for the past year and a half. He's in logistics, one of those jobs where you're constantly traveling, coordinating shipments, dealing with different time zones. We'd kept in touch through video calls and texts, but I hadn't actually seen him in person in all that time. When he told me he was finally coming back stateside for a few weeks, I was thrilled. We've always been close, just 2 years apart in age. Growing up, we were inseparable. Even as adults, we made an effort to stay connected despite the distance. Our cousin, Bilal, heard that Samir was coming back and immediately started planning. Bilal is one of those people who lives for bringing people together. He's the guy who organizes the family reunions, who remembers everyone's birthdays, who always knows someone who knows someone. Bilal called me about a week before Samir's arrival. "We need to do something for Samir," he said. "He's been gone forever. We should have people over, cook some food, make it a real welcome home." I immediately felt that familiar anxiety spike. "I don't know, man," I said. "You know how my HOA is. Linda's going to have a field day if we have too many people over." "So we'll keep it low-key," Bilal countered. "Just close friends and family. We'll do it in your garage. That way it's not even visible from the street. Food, music, people you trust. Nothing crazy. Just a chill gathering." He made it sound so reasonable, and honestly, I wanted to do something for Samir. My brother had been working his tail off in difficult conditions, living out of hotels, eating questionable food. He deserved a proper welcome home. So I agreed, but I was strategic about it. I spent the entire week before the party meticulously following every HOA rule. I mowed my lawn twice. I pressure washed my driveway. I made sure my trash cans were put away within 30 minutes of the collection truck leaving. I wanted zero reason for Linda to be watching my house any more closely than usual. The day of the party, I cleaned out my garage. I've got a 2-car garage, and I normally keep one bay open and use the other for storage. I moved everything to the sides, swept the floor, set up some folding tables. I put out some lawn chairs, strung up some basic white string lights, nothing fancy, just enough so people could see what they were reading. I checked the HOA rules one more time. There was nothing specifically prohibiting having guests over, nothing about gatherings in garages. As long as we weren't blocking the sidewalk or creating excessive noise after 10 p.m., we were technically in the clear. I set up a cooler with drinks and ice. Bilal was bringing food. He'd volunteered to handle all the cooking. My job was just to provide the space and make sure Samir didn't suspect anything. We'd told him it would just be the 3 of us having a quiet dinner. The guests arrived. Samir showed up right at 7 p.m., looking tired but happy. We hugged, I grabbed his bag, and I could see him starting to relax for the first time in probably months. "Just us tonight?" he asked. "Bilal's coming by," I said, which was true. He insisted on bringing food. Guests started arriving around 7:30 p.m. Bilal showed up first with enough food to feed a small army. Grilled kebabs, rice, salads, the works. He'd gone all out. Then Samir's friends started showing up. And this is where I started to notice something interesting. Samir had told me he'd invited a few friends, people he'd worked with on various projects. I'd assumed that meant other logistics coordinators, maybe some folks from shipping companies, normal professional connections. But these guys, they were different. The first thing I noticed was how they entered. Each person came in, said hello, shook hands, all very polite and friendly, but there was this moment when they'd scanned the entire garage. Not in an obvious way, just a quick, efficient sweep of the space. Noting exits, noting who was where, taking everything in. They were all incredibly polite. "Thank you for having me. Great to meet you. Appreciate you opening your home." But there was something about the way they carried themselves. Straight posture, calm demeanor, and alertness that seemed effortless. By 8 p.m., we had about 12 people in the garage. The music was playing at a reasonable volume, nothing that would violate any noise ordinances. People were eating, talking, laughing. It was exactly the kind of low-key gathering I'd hoped for. I was talking with one of Samir's friends, a guy named Marcus. Tall, probably 6'3", with this incredibly calm presence. He was asking about the neighborhood, making small talk, when another friend, Derek, joined us. They started swapping stories about work, and I started to get hints that something didn't quite add up. They'd reference shifts and calls and responding to things, but in a way that was vague enough that I couldn't quite piece it together. The food was amazing. Bilal had outdone himself. We were all standing around, eating off paper plates, just enjoying the evening. Samir looked happier than I'd seen him in years. This was exactly what I'd wanted, just a simple, pleasant evening with good people. And then, at approximately 8:45 p.m., I saw her. The confrontation escalated. Linda seemed almost disappointed by that answer. She looked past me into the garage, studying the guests with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it suspicion, concern, or just her usual need to find something wrong? "This gathering is excessive," she declared. "It violates community standards regarding appropriate use of residential property. You need to disperse these individuals immediately." I felt a flash of anger, but kept it in check. "Linda, with all due respect, I'm not breaking any rules. We're on my property, we're not causing any disturbance, and we're well within our rights to have guests over." "You're creating a nuisance," she countered. "How? By eating dinner?" Linda's expression hardened. "Are you refusing to comply with a direct request from the HOA president?" "I'm politely declining to shut down a perfectly legal gathering in my own home," I said. "If you think I'm violating a specific rule, feel free to cite it in writing and send me the usual documentation. But right now, I'm going back to my guests." I started to turn away, but her next words stopped me. "I will handle this," she said, her voice cold. "This is unacceptable." I watched as she pulled out her phone and marched back toward her house, which was 3 doors down. She was already dialing before she'd even reached the sidewalk. I walked back into the garage, and immediately several people looked at me with concern. They'd clearly watched the entire interaction. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. "Just my HOA president doing her usual thing," I said, trying to sound unconcerned. "She gonna call the cops?" Derek asked, and something about the way he said it, casual but knowing, made me realize he'd seen this kind of situation before. "I wouldn't put it past her," I admitted. Samir came over looking worried. "Ion, if this is going to be a problem, we can—" "No," I said firmly. "We are not doing anything wrong. If she wants to waste the police department's time, that's on her." The revelation. I looked around at the guests in my garage. They'd all gone a bit quiet. Not nervous exactly, but alert, like they were waiting for something. "Samir," I said quietly, pulling my brother aside, "who exactly are these friends of yours?" Samir glanced around, then looked back at me with a slight smile. "You really don't know?" "I know they're not all in logistics," I said. He laughed. "No, definitely not all in logistics. Eon, most of the people here are law enforcement, police officers. They're off duty tonight, but yeah, cops." I stared at him. "Cops?" "I met Marcus through a security training program about 3 years ago. A lot of international logistics involves security protocols, working with law enforcement in different countries. Marcus and I became friends, and through him, I met a bunch of other officers. Good people. When I told them I was coming back stateside, they wanted to meet up." I looked back at the garage. Marcus, Derek, and the others were talking casually, but I could see it now. The way they stood, the way they observed, the calm professionalism that I'd noticed but couldn't place. "So when Linda calls the cops on my party full of cops," I said slowly. "It's going to be interesting," Samir finished, grinning. About 5 minutes after Linda had stormed off, Marcus nodded toward the street. "Your HOA president is filming," he said calmly. I looked. Sure enough, Linda was standing on the sidewalk across the street, phone held up, pointed directly at my garage. She was talking animatedly into the phone while recording. Derek pulled out his own phone and started filming her, filming us. "Just documenting," he said with a shrug. I could see Linda's lips moving from across the street. One of the guests, a woman named Sarah, who'd been quiet most of the evening, watched Linda carefully. "I can read lips a bit," she said. "She's saying, 'Yes, I need police immediately.' Something about multiple men, armed and dangerous." The atmosphere in the garage shifted immediately.
Preparing for the police. Marcus set down his plate. "Okay, everybody listen up," he said, his voice calm but commanding immediate attention. "If officers are responding to a call about armed and dangerous individuals, they're gonna come in hot. We need to be smart about this." The casual party atmosphere evaporated. Everyone was suddenly focused, professional. "Here's what we do," Marcus continued. "When they arrive, hands visible at all times. No sudden movements. If they ask us to step out, we comply immediately. We're polite, we're cooperative, and we let them figure out the situation before we identify ourselves." "Why not just tell them right away?" I asked. "Because if you're a responding officer and someone immediately says they're also a cop, you don't just take their word for it. You still have to verify, still have to treat it as potentially dangerous until you know for sure. We let them do their job, then we clear it up." Everyone nodded. Plates were set down. The music was turned off. People moved to positions where they'd be clearly visible from outside the garage, but not blocking any exits. I felt like I'd stepped into a training exercise. These people had gone from relaxed party guests to organized, professional, and calm in about 30 seconds. "Ion, where's your garage door opener?" Marcus asked. "On the wall there," I pointed. "When they arrive, I'm going to open the garage door fully so they have complete visibility. No barriers, no surprises. Sarah, you stand near Ion. He's the homeowner. They'll want to talk to him." We waited. Linda was still across the street, still filming, looking triumphant. Then we heard them. Sirens. Getting closer. My heart was pounding, but looking around at the people in my garage, I saw nothing but calm, professional readiness. They'd done this before. They knew how to handle it. "Here we go," Marcus said quietly. Multiple police cars pulled onto my street. I counted 4 vehicles. Lights flashing, creating that surreal red and blue strobe effect across the houses. Marcus hit the button and the garage door began rolling up. "Hands visible," he reminded everyone, unnecessarily. Everyone already had their hands out in front of them, relaxed but clearly visible. The police cars stopped in front of my house. Officers emerged from their vehicles, hands near their belts, cautious but professional. I could see them assessing the situation, seeing a garage full of people, all standing calmly with hands visible. "Everyone step out of the garage, slowly, hands where we can see them," one of the officers called out. We complied. One by one, we filed out of the garage, hands visible, moving slowly and deliberately. No quick movements, no sudden gestures. "Who's the homeowner?" an officer asked. "I am," I said, keeping my hands visible. "Ion, I live here." "We received a 911 call about a disturbance, possibly armed individuals. Can you tell me what's going on here?" "It's just a small gathering, officer," I said calmly. "My brother just got back from overseas. We're having dinner with some friends. No weapons, no disturbance. It's been quiet all evening." The turning point, tension breaking. One of the responding officers, a shorter guy with the sergeant's stripes, stepped forward, sweeping his flashlight across the group. The beam landed on Marcus, and the sergeant's entire demeanor changed. "Marcus?" the sergeant said, surprise evident in his voice. "Hey, Jake," Marcus replied with a calm smile. Jake looked around at the other guests, and I could see recognition dawning. "Wait, is that Derek? Sarah? What the hell?" Derek grinned. "Evening, Sarge." The tension evaporated like someone had flipped a switch. Jake started laughing. "You've got to be kidding me. Someone called 911 on a cookout full of cops." Multiple police cars pulled onto my street. I counted 4 vehicles. lights flashing, creating that surreal red and blue strobe effect across the houses. Marcus hit the button, and the garage door began rolling up. Hands visible, he reminded everyone, unnecessarily. Everyone already had their hands out in front of them, relaxed but clearly visible. The police cars stopped in front of my house. Officers emerged from their vehicles, hands near their belts, cautious but professional. I could see them assessing the situation, seeing a garage full of people, all standing calmly with hands visible. "Everyone step out of the garage, slowly, hands where we can see them," one of the officers called out. We complied. One by one, we filed out of the garage, hands visible, moving slowly and deliberately. No quick movements, no sudden gestures. "Who's the homeowner?" an officer asked. "I am," I said, keeping my hands visible. "Ion, I live here." "We received a 911 call about a disturbance, possibly armed individuals. Can you tell me what's going on here?" "It's just a small gathering, officer," I said calmly. "My brother just got back from overseas. We're having dinner with some friends. No weapons, no disturbance. It's been quiet all evening." The turning point, tension breaking. One of the responding officers, a shorter guy with the sergeant's stripes, stepped forward, sweeping his flashlight across the group. The beam landed on Marcus, and the sergeant's entire demeanor changed. "Marcus?" the sergeant said, surprise evident in his voice. "Hey, Jake," Marcus replied with a calm smile. Jake looked around at the other guests, and I could see recognition dawning. "Wait, is that Derek? Sarah? What the hell?" Derek grinned. "Evening, Sarge." The tension evaporated like someone had flipped a switch. Jake started laughing. "You've got to be kidding me. Someone called 911 on a cookout full of cops." The reckoning. Lieutenant Morrison walked Linda away from the group, but we could all still hear the conversation. He wasn't being loud, but his voice carried that unmistakable authority. "Ma'am, when you called 911, you reported armed and dangerous individuals. Can you explain what led you to believe anyone here was armed?" Linda opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I assumed that with so many men gathering suspiciously—" "You assumed?" Morrison repeated. "Did you see any weapons?" "No, but—" "Did you hear any threats or aggressive language?" "No, but the gathering itself was—" "Was what, ma'am?" Linda was scrambling now. "It was a violation of HOA rules. More than 8 people require a permit, and there was excessive activity, and as HOA president, I have the responsibility to—" "Ma'am, HOA violations are civil matters. They are not police matters, and they are certainly not emergency 911 matters. When you call 911 and report armed and dangerous individuals, you're initiating an emergency response. Officers respond prepared for a potentially life-threatening situation." "But I couldn't be sure they weren't dangerous," Linda protested. "There were so many of them, and they could have anything." "So you made assumptions based on seeing a group of people having a barbecue in someone's garage?" said Morrison. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the call log. You told dispatch these men were armed and behaving aggressively. Neither of those things was true." Morrison pulled out his own tablet, scrolling through something. "I'm also seeing that this isn't the first time you've called emergency services for non-emergencies in this neighborhood. Last month, you reported a suspicious vehicle that turned out to be a hospice nurse visiting a resident. 2 months before that, you called about trespassing minors who were neighborhood kids playing in a common area." Linda's face went pale. "I was concerned about safety." "Ma'am, we appreciate community vigilance, but there's a pattern here of misusing emergency services based on assumptions rather than actual emergencies. That's a serious issue." Jake had joined Morrison, and he added, "Ma'am, when you called this in, you specifically said these men were armed and dangerous. Officers responded with that information. That means we came prepared for a violent confrontation. Do you understand how serious that is?" Linda was silent, her clipboard hanging limply at her side. Aftermath and resolution. Morrison stepped back slightly. "Ma'am, I'm documenting this incident as a false emergency report. You'll be receiving official notification about this.
Additionally, I strongly suggest you familiarize yourself with appropriate use of 911. HOA disputes are not police matters. If you have concerns about a gathering, that's a civil issue to be addressed through proper channels, not emergency services. Linda tried one more time, but as HOA president, I have the authority. You have authority over HOA matters. You don't have authority to waste police resources on personal disputes. This conversation is over, ma'am. You're free to go, but understand that continued misuse of emergency services can result in charges. Linda retreated to her house without another word. Her confident stride was gone, replaced by a quick, defeated shuffle. She didn't look back. Several neighbors had come out to see what all the commotion was about, and I could see them watching Linda's retreat with interest. The officers started to disperse. Jake and Murrison both apologized to us for the disruption, though they were clearly trying not to laugh about the whole situation. "Hell of a way to spend an evening," Jake said to Marcus. "Next time you have a cookout, maybe don't invite the whole precinct. Less suspicious that way." Marcus grinned. "Where's the fun in that?" As the police cars pulled away, we all filed back into the garage. The party was effectively over, the moment had passed, but there was a definite sense of satisfaction in the air. The weeks that followed were interesting. Linda stopped her constant patrols. She still went to HOA meetings, but she was noticeably quieter, less aggressive. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood about what had happened, the time Karen called the cops on a party full of cops. People started pushing back against some of the more ridiculous HOA rules. Without Linda's iron grip, the board actually started listening to residents. Someone proposed revising the guest policy, and it passed. Another resident suggested relaxing the decorations restrictions, and that passed too. About 6 weeks after the party, Linda resigned from the HOA board. She cited personal reasons, but everyone knew the real reason. She'd lost her power, her authority, and most importantly, she'd lost the fear that had kept everyone in line. If you enjoyed this story of HOA justice and spectacular karma, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, the tales from HOA-controlled neighborhoods never run out. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.